I certainly felt, and this is no criticism of the Remain campaign, they had a really difficult job, but it had lacked a certain passion and a certain edge, and the future of our country was being decided, and no one was so much as sitting in the road. And we decided that we were going to chase down these Brexiteers and hold them to account for their quotes, maybe 2 years too late, but carrying a ladder, a 90-quid ladder from B&Q and 2 buckets of wallpaper paste, and we were going to do some activism on this.
Hello and welcome to Ways to Change the World. I'm Krishnan Murthy, and this is the podcast in which we talk to extraordinary people about the big ideas in their lives and the events that have helped shape them. My guests today are 2 of the 4 men behind Led by Donkeys. Now, you must have seen their posters or their campaigns, but in case you haven't, they are the people who have been putting up the quotes of Brexiteers on billboards, on mobile signs, on huge sort of flags being carried by crowds of people in Parliament Square. And they have been pointing out hypocrisy, as they see it, and laughing at Brexiteers. And they were secret for quite a long time, but then they revealed themselves, and it turned out that they all, in one way or another, worked for Greenpeace. So with me now are 2 of the 4, Ben Stewart and Ollie Knowles. So, I mean, just take that bit on first head on. Is this a secret Greenpeace campaign to stop Brexit?
Well, I should correct you that Ollie and I do work for Greenpeace, but the other 2 have had some involvement in Greenpeace many years ago. It's worth saying that nobody at Greenpeace knew that we were doing this. We were going out at night, putting up posters as part of a sort of guerrilla poster Brexit accountability campaign, then putting our kids into nursery, and then coming to work, looking quite bleary-eyed, posting our posters on Twitter. People around us were retweeting them, but they didn't know it was us. My boss didn't know it was us. No, it's not some secret Greenpeace campaign. It's been done in spite of rather than because of our Greenpeace careers. Because
Guido Fawkes sort of claimed that he had unmasked you as this sort of secret lefty plot. But what was the truth of it?
Well, I mean, the best that Guido Fawkes had was an expose that said campaigners were campaigning. We are campaigners. We come from a campaign background. But as Ben said, this was very separate to Greenpeace. This was something we kind of did under our own steam because we all felt very strongly about it. And we'd spent many months kind of moaning down the pub or spending evenings kind of scrolling through Twitter and looking at sort of Brexit deteriorate into the madness that it is, and felt that we really wanted to do something under our own steam. So no, this was very separate to our day jobs, and for a significant part of the project was, run the 4 of us, as Ben says, in the evenings once the kids were in bed on a WhatsApp group.
And so this was really conceived in the pub?
Yeah, it was conceived in the Birdcage in Stoke Newington, and back in December 2018, Theresa May had just pulled the withdrawal bill for the first time because she didn't think she had the vote. So Westminster was clouded in chaos, and I remember looking at my phone on Twitter and seeing that old David Cameron tweet where he said, "Britain faces a simple and inescapable choice. Stability and strong government with me or chaos with Ed Miliband." And we were looking at it sort of with incredulity, thinking this sums up the failure of the political class in this country, and Cameron epitomised it. And we just had a chat about how unfortunate it would be if he deleted that tweet. It was kind of an historical document. So we had a conversation about how we could make it into a tweet you can't delete. And so you could put it on a sort of flag and fly it from a plane over London, or you could put it on stickers and slap them on lampposts. And then we looked through the window, and there was a big 48-sheet billboard, a 6-metre by 3-metre billboard on the A10. And we said, we could put it on there. And we got really excited about it for a few minutes. But as is the way with kind of 4 Asian dads in their late 30s and 40s, we thought, well, don't have the time to run an anti-Brexit guerrilla campaign in the evening. We forgot about it till the next day on our WhatsApp group. Our colleague James popped up and said, "I found somewhere that prints these things. Let's go out and do it." And so a few weeks later, on January the 9th, we went out and we put it up.
And you just paid for it yourselves?
We didn't pay for it. We borrowed media real estate from companies that could afford to lend it to us. We just didn't ask them to borrow it. So obviously one interpretation of this could be criminal damage, but we felt, and I still feel, that actually these billboards represent something of a kind of a visual pollution in our environment. My kid doesn't get to choose whether she sees a McDonald's advert when I take her to nursery. So we requisitioned one of these sites to further a public service campaign.
But you had to get the poster printed itself, didn't you?
Yeah, we got the poster printed, but it's worth going back to that first night because, it was a cold January night. We'd never put up a billboard poster before. So Ben and I went out and with all the tools, with the step ladder, with the bucket of paste. And it very nearly didn't happen. We didn't know what we were doing. It was high. It was higher than we thought. The paste wasn't thick enough. The first sheet kept unfolding onto my face. I had a wet, slimy David Cameron face all over my own. We had traffic backing up, staring at us. I mean, it nearly...
Laughing at us.
It nearly didn't happen. And yet we persevered. We got this first poster up. It took us about an hour and a half. And there was a moment then when we saw this big tweet up on a big billboard where we realised, I think for the first time, that we had something that visually really worked as a design idea. Like seeing a tweet at that size actually worked visually and was really arresting. And we had a moment when we stood back from the board and said, I think we've really got something here. There was a first moment that maybe there was something in this.
And does it just come as one piece? How do you put up a poster like that? Is it like wallpaper?
Yeah, I mean, basically you have 12 sheets. And
so you've got to line them all up.
You've got to line them all up, and this
2 centimetre crossover.
This is really where it gets tricky. And yeah, basically you put up the first sheet top left, and then you put up the sheet below it, and so on across the board.
We learned how to do this. I mean, it's worth saying. You go online and say, how do you put up a billboard? And it's not like sort of lemon drizzle cake or how to fix a puncture. There are no tutorials online. So we are dilettantes in that sense. We're self-taught, and we worked out how to do it. It was a real, forgive my language, a real shit show that first night. But we did manage to do it. And once we'd managed to do it, we really, really perfected that technique. But we were so ensconced in the science of putting up a billboard that we actually renamed our WhatsApp group Poster Chat, because all we did was talk about posters and techniques to put up posters.
But what was this deliberately the beginning of a campaign? Were you already led by donkeys at that stage and thinking this is the start of
the
something?
logo was on it, wasn't it?
we were just about. But to say that there was a grand plan, absolutely not. The idea was get the first poster up and see what happened. And we stepped back from that board and said, yes, this works visually, but get ready for maybe a dozen retweets.
But what were you thinking would be that, were you thinking we'll get into the newspaper or we'll go on social media?
What I was thinking is this is going to be cathartic. We had watched the failure of the political and present company accepted media class through the kind of the chaos of late Brexit, not hold the Brexiteers to account for what they had promised during the referendum. So we felt that this was a Brexit accountability project. So in putting up the Cameron tweet, that was actually just a proof of concept. Do we know how to get a billboard up? The real project were the other 4 posters that we had printed up at the same time, which were quotes from Brexiteers promising effectively the sunlit uplands and that Europe would crumble before the awesome might of Britain's negotiating position. So there was the Gove quote, if we vote to leave, we hold all the cards and can choose the path we want. And there were various others like that. The real prize for us was to get those up. Was it to get a double page spread in the Times? Was it to get on your podcast? I think for me personally, it was actually to achieve some catharsis, because it was so frustrating watching how Brexit was developing.
It was something you could do.
It was something we could do by putting them up, and maybe we would get a couple of hundred retweets, and it would feel pretty good that we were doing something. We were all waking up in the morning, scrolling through Twitter and feeling a general sense of hopelessness. And we found when we got up at night putting these up, that we were actually doing something to hold the likes of Gove to account.
Yeah, and we'll get to the impacts of the campaign maybe in a moment, but those first sort of few days of the campaign, we immediately went from reading and moaning about Brexit to doing something about Brexit. And personally, and for the group of the 4 of us, that felt amazing.
Well, tell me about that then, because presumably you were deeply anti-Brexit from the beginning. Had you been at all involved in the referendum campaign, or?
I voted, but that was it.
That was it?
Yeah, the same. And I wouldn't say I was a passionate pro-European. For me, it was seeing the unfolding chaos of Brexit and the exaggerations, the ideology behind the Brexit leadership, and then seeing, the unfolding reality against some of the things that we'd been promised. So it was almost the process of Brexit and the chaos that ensued that motivated me to go out.
And how had that, watching it unfold as, well, just as an ordinary person, but also somebody who is, would you say you're activists?
Yeah.
So you are activists,
Yeah.
so you're in that space. What had you started to feel about your country?
I had started to feel a degree of simmering anger that the government and the Brexiteers were pursuing the project like they'd won the referendum 80-20 instead of 52-48. That was what I really felt. You know, it was as if the Remainers had won it 52-48 and immediately said that this was a mandate for a single European army and joining the euro. And that was, in a sense, what small r radicalised me. I felt that this was fundamentally undemocratic and that they need to be held to account for the promises that they made. So we, for example, have put up a lot of posters about Owen Paterson, Boris Johnson and others, and Daniel Hannan saying there's no way we'll leave the single market. And that felt very satisfying to me.
Yeah, similar. I mean, I guess I felt from the get-go very angry with Cameron for having put what was not even an attempt to resolve the European issue within his own party, but was really a device to save and secure his own premiership, to a referendum that then turned out to be hugely polarising and hugely divisive. And then to see Brexit unfold in that way, that was motivation enough.
So let's just sort of rewind a bit and just work out you know, who you are, I suppose, as well. Because, I mean, to what extent are you political anyway? I mean, what do you do for Greenpeace, first of all?
My title is Deputy Programme Director. I don't really know what that means. I manage people. And whereas I used to do activism where I, used to go and, I guess, lock onto things and that kind of thing, since having kind of kids and a mortgage and that kind of thing, I'm in a management role and a role of responsibility. And actually it felt quite liberating and different for us to suddenly be out on the front line again. But yeah, I'm political.
So you've done sort of direct action type protest in the past?
Yeah.
You've been arrested and all those sorts of things?
Yeah, I think like Greenpeace brings like an ethos of the mind bomb to campaigning, where you do a campaign intervention that in one single picture, quote, phrase, image can shift people's perceptions. And I guess we brought that experience to the Brexit debate and maybe did something that people hadn't done before. I certainly felt, and this is no criticism of the Remain campaign, they had a really difficult job, but it had lacked a certain passion and a certain edge, and the future of our country was being decided and no one was so much as sitting in the road. And we decided that we were going to chase down these Brexiteers and hold them to account for their quotes, maybe 2 years too late, but carrying a ladder, a 90-quid ladder from B&Q and 2 buckets of wallpaper paste, and we were going to do some activism on this.
And Ollie, what's your role?
I would describe myself as a political person, definitely, but I work for Greenpeace International and on the Oceans campaign, where I have a lot of responsibility for writing and supporting strategies and then helping our campaigns in different parts of the world get up and running. But yes, I'm a political person.
But do you work for Greenpeace because that's the issue you care about the most, or are you somebody who works in NGOs over the years and you currently work in Greenpeace?
No, I am an environmentalist. I've worked for Greenpeace for 17 or 18 years, so it's a big part of what I do, and I think Greenpeace is an excellent campaigning organisation that has an approach to campaigning and a clever use of direct action. That I came into campaigning through an activist background. Greenpeace allowed me to continue that. In a sense, the Led by Donkeys work is activism as well. So that's the thread, I think, that's run through it for me.
And when it comes to electoral politics, are either of you members of political parties,
No.
or activists, or campaigners, or anything like that?
No, I've never.
I mean, people will assume you're Labour supporters. Is that correct?
No, I mean,
that's a tricky one.
It's tricky, yeah. In terms of our project, no, we've had Corbyn in our sights as well, and in fact, to some extent, we've wherever the advocates of Brexit have been, they've been fair game for our project.
So you don't have a party
we're not signed up political.
I've never knocked on a door and urged someone to vote for a particular political party. I have an enormous respect for the people that do. It sounds like the worst way to spend an evening that I can possibly imagine. I don't mean that pejoratively. I mean, I have a lot of respect for the people that do that. I think I probably voted for every major political party that you can vote for in England, bar the Conservatives.
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty good description of me.
And Ollie, have you done the kind of protesting that Ben has done as well?
Yeah, a lot of direct action over the years.
What sort of things?
All sorts of things, from some street protests, done direct action at sea, stop fishing, climbed incinerators and power stations, background in some climate change campaigning, some of the anti-roads protests I was involved in way back in the 90s as well. So yeah, like a long back catalogue of using what I hope is direct action and activism in a responsible way to drive change.
But because this is very different, isn't it? I mean, yes, there's an illegal element of it in terms of commandeering a billboard, but there's a humour to what Led by Donkeys is doing and a sort of a lightness of touch.
Deliberately.
That is totally different to that kind of Greenpeace campaigning, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that the kind of the hard-edged activism would be quite alienating in this space. People are so polarised that I think you have to possibly coax people over to your point of view, or to merely look at these quotes and reappraise their opinion of these politicians or Brexit in the light of their observed reality. And I think bashing people on the head doesn't work with Brexit. And we have always looked for the comedic angle in this. And we actually think that laughing at some of these people has a great deal of political power. And so translating that anger into ridicule is both cathartic to us, but more importantly, it's very engaging on social media. So we've got a tactic, I suppose you might say, of doing stuff in the real world, like analog campaigning, but making it work on social media so that we get big reach on social media. And we do get a really, really big reach on social media. But to do that, having that comedic twist to it, we find really works for social media engagement.
Do you think you're changing anyone's minds?
Well, we certainly hope so. I mean, I think we've definitely played a big role in galvanising and boosting the morale of the Remain campaign. But we have also had billboards out across the country, and we've put a lot of work into kind of building local and regional media around those billboards or other interventions. The big sand drawing we did up in Redcar, the field that we ploughed down in Swindon. I mean, Ben said an interesting thing. We operate in an information overloaded age, and what we're trying to do is put these quotes out without a big analysis that says, here's what you should think about them. So in effect, you get to reappraise the politicians' quotes against the reality that you see unfolding, but without us saying, here's what you should think, here's our analysis. And I think there's some of the power in what we're doing is in that proposition.
But your aim is to stop Brexit.
It's funny, actually. About 3 weeks after we started this project, we had another strategy meeting in the birdcage, and we sat down and we said, actually, we've moved on from this being cathartic for us and holding Michael Gove to account, and now being campaigners, we now need to articulate what our objectives are here. And we went round and we said, what do people think about a second referendum or a people's vote, whatever you want to call it? And none of us were really sure what the others thought about that. And it turned out that all of us had the same opinion, which is that we were late converts to that particular proposition. But we did at that point then believe that a second referendum had democratic legitimacy and was the right way forward. And therefore we made that one of our objectives. But it's worth saying that we had other objectives as well, which were, I would say, to hold the Brexiteers to account. This was a Brexiteer accountability project that felt that the media wasn't doing a good enough job of holding these people to account. So, for example, when Liam Fox went on the Today programme, how could he get through the first 40 seconds of an interview, given the chaos that had enveloped the Brexit project, without the interviewer saying to him, hang on, you said that this would be the easiest trade deal in history. And we felt that there was a failure of the media that we were addressing and redressing by getting our posters up and getting huge engagement online for them.
And so when it comes to your aim now, at the time of recording, Parliament is trying to decide whether to call an election or not that will either bypass another referendum or, if Labour were to win, might lead to one. So where are you now? I mean, do you need to go back to the pub and work out what you all think?
We always need to go back to the pub, to be honest.
Yeah, and it's always a work in progress. I mean, the politics is moving so quickly. But look, yeah, we are still working towards a second referendum. And so in terms of the election, we want an outcome which gives us the best chance of keeping that second referendum alive. Clearly, Boris Johnson coming back with a majority would be a problem for that.
And are you working with the People's Vote campaign?
Not really, no. I mean, we know people within the People's Vote campaign. We've done a couple of things at their rallies, but we're very separate from them. We have we have no formal links with them. We've spoken to them. It's quite interesting observing what's been happening in the last couple of days. We don't really know who these characters are and the ins and outs of it, and we're actually quite relieved that we just have our little merry band of 4 people organising in a WhatsApp group getting stuff done.
And is it still just the 4, or do you have employees now? Because you've raised a lot of money, haven't you?
We've raised a lot of money. We are paying 2 people to work 1 or 2 days a week to help us out because, for example, we need to get the finance right. And if there's an election, then there's obviously a lot of reporting to the Electoral Commission about one's spending and regulated spending. And we want to have someone that understands that to ensure that we don't just abide by the law, but abide by the spirit and the letter of the law.
So what are you? What do you count as? Because you're not a political party.
We are. I don't know the exact terminology, but I think we're a third-party campaign group. And as a result of the lobbying act that was introduced actually by the coalition government after the Lib Dems feared that they were going to get a shellacking at the 2015 election by students because of the tuition fees U-turn. A legislation was passed to stop groups like the NUS and I suppose Greenpeace and others from spending what they consider to be too much money during an election. It's actually a pernicious piece of legislation because it's called the Lobbying Act, but it does nothing to damp down on actual genuine dark money and lobbying, and really affects progressive campaign groups while not affecting in any way, for example, the Dominic Cummings targeted Facebook operation that's going to be able to spend 14 million quid in the coming election.
So what will you be able to spend?
I think it's about £390,000 in an election. But here's the thing, it's in the year leading up to an election. So we've been going since January the 9th. And the Electoral Commission would look at any spending where we had a crack at a politician that they would perceive as being designed to affect the result of a general election, and that would count towards regulated spending. Now, for us, we're not super wealthy, and it's not really going to affect us that much. But there are lots of other groups that want to move into that democratic space and get their voice heard that find it very, very difficult. And I would just say again, genuine lobbyists aren't affected by this.
On that, where does you basically sort of set up crowdfunding on the internet.
Yeah.
So how much have you raised?
It's about 600,000 since January the 9th, and I think it's an average donation of about 28 quid. Look,
that's extraordinary,
we are astounded by that. When we put up that first Cameron poster, Ollie and I walked back to the birdcage for a pint, and as he said, we'd said, look, we have to be prepared to get 12 retweets off this, and we'd sunk 250 quid in buying the 5 posters, and we were thinking that would really be it. Now, when it took off a little bit, so we got, I think, 3,000 retweets off the first one, we got some more printed up, and we were determined to go down to Dover and do 4 in a night, which is what we did, and that's the moment that the project really exploded. And we decided to set up a crowdfunder. We set our target at £10,000 and gave ourselves 30 days to get there, and we hit it in 2 hours.
It's worth pausing on this. We stumbled on a good idea, and we went and did something about it, but this project would have gone nowhere without all the support we've had from people who've donated, £10 and £20. And there have been many people who've donated only £5. So there's clearly people with not huge amounts of money that have backed us. And with that has come, I guess, a real sense of responsibility that we spend every pound really well. But what it shows, I think, is just that there's a huge appetite for taking it back to politicians, for holding them to account. Yeah. There's clearly a lot of people out there who want to back projects that do that.
And have you had big, rich backers as well? What's your biggest donation or biggest donor?
We've had some 4-figure donations in that.
So are you still doing your day jobs? Or is this kind of taken over?
we checked out actually for a couple of months in the run up to October the 31st. And we've taken leave from our day jobs. And now we had expected Brexit to be done by October the 31st. And actually, Ollie got a note from Greenpeace HR today saying, sort of, see you next week, wasn't it?
Yeah, when are you back? So yeah, we may try and stretch that a little further.
So is this costing you money? Are you being paid by by donkeys now, or are you donating your time?
we are not out of pocket in that we're taking exactly the same amount of money that we earn in our day jobs, and we actually went back to some of the people on the crowdfunder who had given a bit more than the average and said, look, we're going to take a couple of months out. Would you help cover our costs? Because, we've all got 2 kids, we've all got mortgages and that kind of thing.
And that reinforces and rightly, in my view, the separation from Greenpeace. We're out from Greenpeace on unpaid leave, so we've raised that bit of extra money to cover our salaries while we're out doing the donkey's work.
I mean, obviously, there's a possibility that Brexit happens in the next 3 months. And if Boris Johnson wins the election, that will almost certainly happen.
Yeah.
But, I mean, this could go on and on. I mean, are you just in it for as long as it takes?
We don't know is the honest answer to that. But we have had some conversations about, where this goes, if a deal passes. And, let's remind ourselves, when a deal passes, it kind of Brexit starts. Like, the trade deals are negotiated, the free marketeers move in, the neoliberals move in to take control of the NHS, or, so on and so forth. In a sense, the fight to win the story of what happens starts there. And I think there could be a role. I mean, there'd be a role for many other groups and activists as well. But we see potentially a role for Led by Donkeys in that.
Who came up with Led by Donkeys?
Well, the name.
Yeah.
It was James, actually. We were buzzing around on the WhatsApp group, what do we call ourselves? And he suggested Lions Led by Donkeys, and that was a bit of a mouthful. And we felt that it captured the moment, a reminder that this was late December, early January, 10 months ago, when, we were just in the foothills of the real kind of like vintage Brexit chaos that we're living through now. And the phrase Led by Donkeys really seemed to sum it up. I mean, for any listeners that don't know where that phrase comes from, apparently it was invented by German commanders in the First World War to describe the British Tommies, who they regard as this kind of like really like brave cadre of people that were being let down by their incompetent generals. And we felt that kind of summed up the British population at that point. And there was a real populist surge then where people were kind of, the Conservatives and Farage were trying to stoke anger at the establishment. And actually, if there was going to be a genuine populism, it would be really anger and disappointment at the people that had conceived and then were trying to deliver Brexit. And we felt Led by Donkeys captured that. We had a lot of doubts about the name, didn't we? And then once we started doing it, we owned it. I mean, it's a bit like, I have a 6-month-old daughter and a 2-year-old daughter, and you name them, and then 3 months later you think, oh my God, is that the right thing? But you love them because they're your daughter, and that's their name, and you get on with it. And now that's who they are, and that's who Led by Donkeys is.
Your daughter's going to listen back to this one day and go, what? You don't like my name? So it's like...
I love their names. I love them. All I'm saying is, I'm full of doubt and imposter syndrome.
I mean, in terms of sort of hypocrisy and uselessness of politicians, it's obviously not just on the Brexit side.
Totally.
So why aren't you pointing out the uselessness and hypocrisy of the Remainer side as well?
Yeah, because we have a political agenda, obviously. Let's not. We are Remainers. That said, I think that the lies, lunacy, and hypocrisy of the Brexiteers who are running the country and are responsible for delivering this project really are what needs to be challenged. Another thing is that the media in this country, and in particular the print media, have a very profound agenda where they allow these examples of hypocrisy to go unchallenged, and therefore someone else needs to move into that space. This isn't an original point, but if politics was a computer game, then the Brexiteers would be playing on the easy setting. They get to do and say things that are so profoundly at odds with their previous promises. Witness, for example, Boris Johnson's border in the Irish Sea. And the national conversation not focus on that, because the national conversation is to an extent conducted by the editors of the print media, that actually there's a gap there in the market for holding those people to account. That said as well, if Aaron Banks wants to go around putting up posters of what Dominic Griever said, he's more than welcome. No one's stopping him. I just don't think the examples of hypocrisy are so profound, and I don't think the failure of the media to hold those people to account is so profound, and that's why there's a space for us to do what we do.
I mean, I wonder if you've just sort of illustrated how this campaign has changed you, in that, you said you kind of started out this as sort of four Remainer dads, fairly ordinary Remainer dads, albeit with activist backgrounds. Now you obviously have a very, very detailed knowledge of every twist and turn. Did you have that same level of understanding of what was going on with Brexit?
I'll speak for myself. I mean, I didn't, and I'm still not a political expert by any means, but yeah, certainly we've got a lot closer to it. Day in, day out, we're swapping notes and theories on what's happening and what's going to happen next. I still wouldn't make predictions, but
who amongst us had ever heard of a programme motion before? How many of us can truly claim that we knew about GAP 24, Article 50, that kind of thing? We're all, it's a bit like suddenly when, the Football World Cup comes around and we're all really, really cognizant of every single player and their scoring record. We're all so ensconced in Brexit that we're into the detail. Not just us, but millions of people around the country.
But I suppose, how normal do you think you are now? Is what I mean.
Ask our partners.
Yeah, good question. And I think, we take care, I guess, to make sure we talk to our, non-Brexit following friends and family, because taking a read outside of the room is really important. In fact, only a few weeks ago, James and I went up to Barnsley to spend a few days there, just chatting to people on the street and in cafes and pubs, just to get a read of the mood in the room. And yeah, it was, it's not going to be groundbreaking stuff to hear, but obviously a lot of people on the street there just want Brexit to happen. Don't care if it's a no deal. Feel that we did very well during the Second World War. Thank you very much. To go out and hear those views and take a proper read of different attitudes is really important. But we do take care to do that because we know we are in we're in a place where we're following Brexit very, very closely, and you can take a false reading when you're doing that.
Yeah. And when you have those conversations, what do you come away thinking?
You hear a lot of people say, we've spoken to a lot of people who are now Remainers who voted Leave. And when you listen to those people, actually what they say is, I was conned and I was lied to. I fell for the red bus is a really common one. So yes, I think there are people out there who feel strongly they want to get this done, but there are now many people, and I think there are a group of people who aren't well heard at the moment who've actually changed their minds, who voted Leave but would now vote Remain because they've seen the chaos and felt that they were lied to. And many of the people I've spoken to are people who probably don't have very much. They don't have very much money, and they pressed the Brexit button because they saw it as a change button, and they wanted something different. They wanted something more. They were promised more money. They were promised more money for the NHS, and it's now been exposed patently as a lie. It's not coming. These things were false promises. So I still feel good to go out and get the reading, but. Yeah, I feel for having those conversations very motivated to keep working on the Brexit issue.
On that, it's a slight side issue, but you say it was a false promise, but it's arguable that the extra money for the NHS that the government has announced is mainly because they have to try and meet the promise on the side of the bus. So maybe it has delivered something, after all, isn't it?
Well, it's not 350 million quid a week. I actually saw an amazing Vote Leave ad from YouTube last week that was put out in 2016, and it's a split screen. On the left-hand side it says if we stay in the EU, and on the right-hand side is if we leave the EU, and it's a woman going into a hospital waiting room, and after a couple of seconds the stories part, and if we stay in the EU then she waits in the waiting room all day and doesn't get treated, but if we leave the EU there are nurses fawning over her, she's treated very quickly, and she leaves into the sunlit uplands of the car park, and then it said let's Brexit, and we can build loads of new hospitals. It's deeply disingenuous, incredibly cynical, and it was developed by people, the Vote Leave campaign, that actually in their day jobs have a commitment to offer what they would describe as free market solutions to the NHS. A lot of the people that ran the Vote Leave campaign came out of 55 Tufton Street. So Matthew Elliott, for example, the founder of the Taxpayers Alliance, was the chief executive of the Vote Leave campaign. Those people produced reports and put on conferences to provide privatisation solutions for the NHS. So it was deeply, deeply cynical for them to use the NHS and to use more state money for the NHS to win this campaign. It was deeply cynical of them to lie about Turkey's accession to the EU. Those were the two things that were hammered again and again and again during the referendum, and god damn, it worked.
When you look at the two different ways you've campaigned now,
What are the two different ways?
well, the more traditional Greenpeace direct action
I see what you
route,
mean. Yeah.
and what you've done with Led by Donkeys.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think has been the most successful?
Look, there are huge differences. So I'm definitely don't want to be down on Greenpeace. Like working internationally across a network of national groups who are in tune with the national opinion and mood, your ability to build international projects that, in my case, for example, chase big industrial fishing fleets around the world and follow their supply chains. Wow, you get to do that with a big organisation like Greenpeace. But there's also a cost to working in a big NGO, and that's that it can be slow-paced. It's there's a lot of committees to get work through, perhaps rightly so. It's been very different working with Led by Donkeys, and one of the things that we've all really enjoyed about it is working in a small group where effectively the creative process is ideas are rounded up, they're actually sharpened and they're honed very quickly. And when it comes to delivering a campaign on something like Brexit, which is moving every 24 hours, the cycle and development's happening very quickly, working in that small group has been a real liberation. It's felt very exhilarating, and the idea we can get outputs from idea to delivery in the space of a few days, is also great. But they're quite different models.
It's worth looking. One similarity with what we've done at Greenpeace before is the posters really represent like political street theatre, and there hasn't been a lot of good street theatre around Brexit. And it can be a pejorative phrase, street theatre. It can kind of be, activists dressed as clowns doing juggling with that's not what this is about. This is about going to Boris Johnson's constituency and putting up a poster, where he says no one supported the bankers like I did. I really stood up for the bankers. And then watching people react to that.
Best example of the sort of street theatre that Ben's talking about that I think we created was when we put up a tweet from Jeremy Corbyn in Islington, but it was a blank tweet because we were frustrated that his position on Brexit was unclear, and we invited some young activists to come down and write a message to Jeremy Corbyn. So we set up a step ladder, they turned up with paints and spray cans, so we had a group of activists down there. Very quickly, something unexpected happened, which was that people started pulling over in their cars, on their bicycles. We had a lorry driver pull over and shout out of his cab, taxi drivers were shouting. Suddenly, in front of cameras and journalists was a street scene based entirely on the issue of Brexit. And I did think, and I think we all felt that moment. Perhaps if people were participating more in politics in this kind of way, in the street together, this civic space, maybe we wouldn't be in the mess that we are in. It felt like a moment that we created.
And that's why people often say you were the Remain campaign that never happened during the Remain campaign, I suppose. I mean, do you think that is going to be your role in the election?
We don't know. To be honest, people say, what are you going to do in the election? We often don't know what we're doing at the end of the week. I mean, it's like that. It's been a continuous, hyper-stressful rolling deadline since January the 9th. All we do is kind of try to get stuff out on deadline on a WhatsApp group. We are aware that there is apparently an election in the offing, and we have talked about it, and we are thinking, what do we do about that? I guess our USP is to take historic quotes from politicians and make them famous so that people are more aware of the potential disingenuous nature of their promises.
Now, some people get very wound up that you present everything as tweets when the quotes weren't always from Twitter.
Yeah.
Is there a slight dishonesty at all to what you're doing?
Well, it says on the bottom left-hand corner.
Not a tweet.
It says, for example, Nigel Farage, when Nigel Farage said before the referendum, in a 52-48 referendum, this would be unfinished business by a long way. So in the bottom left-hand corner, really very, very big, it says, Nigel Farage didn't tweet this. He said it to the Daily Mirror on the 16th of May, 2016.
And we never felt it was a great defence to come back and say, no, I didn't tweet this. I just said it to the Mirror, or I just said it in the House of Commons. I mean, we're clear. We do not get politicians coming back to us and saying, you've taken me out of context, or I didn't say that. They're not coming near us on that front.
How close do you get to the other side, if you like? I mean, during the march,
March to Leave.
yes, you were literally following them around.
Yeah.
Did you interact with them much?
Some of them were angry. Some of them were not happy with us. I mean, I think they saw what we were doing, and we had the ad vans with them. But we took a lot of care not to direct our fire to the marchers, and to really keep Farage and his crew at the centre of it. The fact was, he deserted them after day one. He showed up on the final day as well. But we made sure that with all our social media output, we kept Farage and his responsibility for that march front and centre. And
we actually had some respect for the marches.
Absolutely.
We looked at them as activists, and they were doing something that they felt passionately about. They were taking time out of their lives, and it was physically grueling. They were walking 20 miles a day, and I personally saw in them, members of my family, or like my extended family and friends who had a different political position to me. And we made a decision right at the start of the march that we were not going to rinse those people on social media. Now, we had a treasure chest of photographs and video of the stereotypical splenetic Brexiteer shouting at us. But we didn't put them out, and we made it all about Farage. So there was a test for this, for example. About halfway through the march, they checked into a Wetherspoons hotel, which presumably they got free because the Wetherspoons guys are Brexiteer, for the night, and it was called the Unicorn Hotel. Now, at that point, the phrase unicorn was, a way to really take the piss out of the Brexiteers. And I remember I messaged Ollie, and this is in the book that we've written about this. I messaged Ollie, said, "Come on, it's the unicorn. This is too good. We have to do this. Let's rinse them." And Ollie, very rightly, because he's a better person than me, said, "No, we have made a commitment to not take the piss out of the marchers. They are activists. This is all about Farage and Tice and Aaron Banks and these multi-millionaires who have abandoned them." So our beef wasn't with them. Now, Will was up there, and he actually took some personal abuse from them, and that really upset him a lot. But we weren't interested in having a fight with the marchers.
No, I mean, the unicorn photo was a great photo, but it was right not to put it out. and actually, what we were doing as well through that period was watching the comment sections on our social media accounts carefully to police criticism of the marchers. And I remember one woman coming onto our Instagram account saying, "Do you know what, I'm really proud of my husband. He's been out marching for 3 days in the rain." And a bit of a pile-on started, and we came into that very quickly and said, "No, absolutely not. Leave this alone.
You should be proud of your husband.
You should be proud of your husband. He's been out there marching for something he believes in." And the point we made was, maybe if a few more of us were doing that, we wouldn't be in this mess.
You were anonymous for a while, and then you sort of came out after a few months. Have you become the targets of abuse or online abuse or anything like that?
A little bit, but very marginal. I mean, we expected more when we
were scared about it. Actually, we were really stressed about it, especially because we've all got young kids. I had a second daughter in early April, which was so she was a month old when we came out, and I was really worried about it. And actually it's been fine. I mean, compared to the likes of Gina Miller, maybe there's a lesson in that. Why does Gina Miller, a woman of colour, get all this abuse and we don't?
And so what do your families make of what you're doing? I mean, are you heroes or villains at home?
Mostly heroes, but and all our partners have been incredibly supportive of this and have had to have been, because it's been long hours. But more than just supportive.
Because it changes you, doesn't it, doing something like this? Yeah,
completely. Long hours, you're trying to watch a movie at home, you're scrolling through Twitter to look for the latest story. Very supportive partners, and also partners who in their own ways have helped guide and steer the project. We've run a lot of content by them, we've run ideas by them, they've inputted. So no, it's been really important.
It's about being present is the problem, like for me. I don't know, I find it's just so all-encompassing. I find thinking about bloody Brexit all the time. And I was on the bus with my daughter the other day, and I realised I'd lost 10 minutes by staring into the middle distance and I'm thinking about the Letwin Amendment. And then I heard who's 2 years old, my daughter's voice saying, "I want to go home and see Mummy." I was like, oh God, I could have spent those 10 minutes talking to her instead of thinking about bloody Sir Oliver Letwin. And that happens too often. I need to delete Twitter off my telephone, but the thing is, we live in the Twitterverse doing this project.
Do you have to decide how far you're prepared to go? I mean, Be prepared to go to jail for Brexit?
I would not go to jail for Brexit, but when I was younger, I was prepared to go to jail for climate change. It's a different calculation now because I've got 2 daughters, and and I would not, abandon them for Wormwood Scrubs. But even when I didn't have kids, Brexit isn't something I think I'd go to jail for. No, but climate change, yes, I would. And in fact, I nearly did. I climbed a coal-fired power station chimney at Kingsnorth in Kent in 2007, and we ended up on trial in 2008. And we advanced a defence where we were justified in doing what we did because we were stopping the harm that a coal-fired power station we did. And we did face jail, and in the end, Jim Hansen, the NASA director, came and gave evidence for us, and we were acquitted. And going to that question of does direct action work, that evening, I remember getting back from the court and watching TV and the BBC Environment correspondent saying, this is resonating at the heart of government, and there are now plans to abandon the 8 new coal-fired power stations. So for me, creating political theatre that actually speeds up the national conversation. It allows the media to report slow, relatively mundane stories in a way that brings colour to them and brings them alive and creates conflicts and creates drama, and so that we can discuss things that we otherwise wouldn't discuss. Now, you want to discuss a £13 billion runway in West London. It's a lot easier if people are camped out on the runway, on a metal tripod, and that they're going to tell you why they're doing it. At that point, you can have a conversation about that, where otherwise the media wouldn't cover it. So, a lot of activism is, honestly designed to hack the media, because the media's incentives aren't always to cover Channel 4 News. I mean this genuinely, Channel 4 News excluded. And actually,
I'll take it.
I was going to say, actually, I remember very early in the Donkeys project, thinking, being really frustrated still with the media, and you interviewed, I think it was John Redwood, and he was talking about a poll, and you called him out on being disingenuous about the poll, and I remember shouting at the TV, going, that is what we need to see, that is what we need to see. Do you remember that?
Yes, yeah.
Right.
Where I told him it wasn't true.
Yeah,
yes.
because it wasn't true.
Has it been a bit odd this year, the year of Extinction Rebellion and massive climate change protests actually making big advances, when you've actually been doing Brexit?
That's a really good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, yeah, definitely there have been moments, but actually, one of the motivations for me in fighting Brexit is that it is essentially an environmental fight. It's a workers' rights fight.
So it is intersectional.
It's absolutely,
Yeah.
it's absolutely that the case. And so for me, it's part and parcel of the same fight.
Someone from Extinction Rebellion asked me this recently, and I said what I believe, which is that Brexit is a climate fight. It just is. There is a danger if you lose the level playing field that a deregulated Tufton Street style economy sits on the edge of Europe and really drives down standards and ambition across Europe. Like, there is a lot at stake in 2020 as you move towards the December cliff edge, particularly because of the nature of the withdrawal agreement, kicking the level playing field issue down the road. It's a climate issue. I totally get what you're saying, though. Like, my natural place to be would have been on the streets with Extinction Rebellion, but we were too busy with Led by Donkeys, and that was almost a microcosm of the conflicts that you've identified. And sometimes, honestly, I've thought, God, like, is this what we're doing here? Like, the big fight is climate change, but, there's no way I'm going to do Brexit for the rest of my life, and I will get back to climate change, pure climate change campaigning.
But it feels to me a bit like,
enough.
Climate change is the big fight. But there is a front line at the moment in the UK, and it's Brexit. And I feel like we're on the front line fighting that. We lose Brexit, we start to lose some of the climate fight.
We've been talking throughout about how you want to change Britain and the world, I suppose, in terms of climate change. But if you could just change the world with a magic wand, what's it going to be?
Well, if we could do one thing, it would be abundant, affordable, renewable energy next year. That would genuinely change the world. We're in really, really big trouble on climate change. Since I became a dad, I really am scared rather than just interested. So if we could do one thing, it would be that. It wouldn't sort out all of our problems, but if we don't sort that out, then we won't have any other problems to sort out.
Yeah, well, climate change is the big issue. I would say as well, coming from my background in campaigning for oceans, the parallel fight we have to fight at the same time is the loss of biodiversity. It's no good putting the climate right only to turn around in 25 years' time to realise we live on a planet which is entirely denuded. We have to stop the loss of biodiversity, and we have to stop it very quickly.
Ben and Ollie, thank you very much indeed for sharing your ways to change the world. Hope you enjoyed that. If you did, then please do give us a rating and a review. All of these interviews are viewable on the Channel 4 News YouTube channel. Our producer is Sarah Goff. Until next time, bye-bye.